State of the Union with John King, CNN Sunday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern.
14 years ago today, on this morning, Americans were shocked by a tragedy in Oklahoma City. The first time, there was no Department of Homeland Security, the first time many Americans used the term or heard the term Homeland Security. And people in that city will gather today, and I believe we have a live picture of it, for a commemoration marking the 14th anniversary. As we reflect on that day 14 years ago, it is your job now to keep that from happening again. Are we at a greater risk of domestic terrorism events like that today, or lesser?
I think we're at a greater state of readiness. The threat of terrorism, whether from a foreign source or domestic source, is now it's with us. We have to acknowledge that. We have to minimize the risk of it, and we have to be ready to deal with it. And I think with the Department of Homeland Security, all the changes that have occurred since Oklahoma City, since 9/11, there has been improvement.
As you know, a recent report from your department raised a lot of eyebrows and caused a bit of controversy, because in that report you said this, that the Department of Homeland Security assesses that right-wing extremists will attempt to recruit and radicalize returning veterans in order to exploit their skills and knowledge derived from military training and combat. The willingness of a small percentage of military personnel to join the extremist groups during the 1990s because they were disgruntled, disillusioned, or suffering from the psychological effects of war is being replicated today. Is being replicated today. You have active intelligence that tells you people coming back from Iraq, coming back from Afghanistan, who might be mad at the military, who might simply have post-traumatic stress disorder, are being actively recruited by extremist groups?
Certainly. And our department is not the only department that has made that comment. The FBI has made the same comment. Other groups have made the same comment. Here's the important point. The report is not saying that veterans are extremists. Far from it. What it is saying is returning veterans are targets of right-wing extremist groups that are trying to recruit those to commit violent acts within the country. We want to do all we can to prevent that.
But when you say will attempt, who are these groups? What do they want to do?
Well, it's a number of groups, almost far too numerous to mention, regrettably so. But some of them, indeed, want to do what happened in Oklahoma City, that is, commit violent acts within the homeland. And again, Department of Homeland Security, we were stood up because of a terrorist act, 9/11. But that came on the heels of Oklahoma City, which was a domestically caused terrorist act. So one of our missions that Congress has given us and that we do is try to keep everybody informed. What are the kinds of things that can lead to an act of violence? But in this case, where are groups recruiting? As
you know, veterans groups and some conservative critics of the administration have raised hell, excuse my language, about the use of the term, about veterans there. What specifically do you see happening? And you're talking active investigations where a veteran comes home. How do they reach out to him?
Well, a number of ways. There can be a number of ways of doing it. It can be word of mouth. It can be the Internet, all kinds of ways to reach out. That's why the Obama administration wants to work with returning vets, make sure they've got health care, education opportunities, job opportunities, all the like, so that they do not become a target of these extremist groups. And again, I regret that in the politicization of everything that happens in Washington, D.C., some took offense. But when you read the report, what it was saying is, look, we have a threat of terrorism within our own shores, and one of the groups being targeted to see if they will be aligned with that are some of our veterans. Let's make sure we prevent that.
Do you regret the politicization, or do you regret the choice of words by your department? Could it have been written better to maybe reduce the politicization?
It could, in retrospect, anything could be written differently to prevent politicization. But I think any fair reading of the report says this is very consistent with other reports that have been issued before. They were issued before Obama was president. They're being issued now. They're meant to give people what is called situational awareness, and they're certainly not intended to give offense. Far from it.
Another in that same report was this line here on the threat of extremism at home. It may include groups and individuals that are dedicated to a single issue, such as opposition to abortion or immigration. The Democratic chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee has taken offense with that language. He says, well, wait a minute. Are you singling people out just for their political views? Because we are having a conversation that is based on this gift of free speech. So if I'm an anarchist, if I oppose abortion, there are many things that I could believe or anyone out there could believe that you would find horrible. I'm allowed to think it. I'm allowed to say it as long as I do anything wrong. Who are these groups? Do you have active investigations of anti-immigration groups or anti-abortion groups, you believe that they are preparing to conduct terrorist attacks?
Well, without going into ongoing work, let's just point out to history, and we'll take the abortion, for example. Of course, people have different points of view about abortion. The last thing the Department of Homeland Security about is infringing on anybody's constitutionally protected rights. On the other hand, at the very edge of the debate, at the very edge are the extremist groups that have committed violent crimes. They've committed bombings and the like. And that's where you cross from constitutionally protected free speech, freedom of assembly, all the rights we cherish, into Homeland Security and law enforcement. When is that right not being exercised? It's being abused.
A controversial decision this past week to make public top secret memos from the Bush administration about the interrogation tactics, about waterboarding, about slamming people into walls, tactics that make you recoil when you read them. It was a big debate, though. Even the current CIA director, Leon Panetta, did not want them made public. He thought that was not fair to the people in the intelligence community. You are in those meetings. What was your vote, and do you see any harm in releasing them?
Well, I think the content of those meetings is for the actual participants, but I think the release of them is very consistent with what President Obama said during the campaign and how he's conducting his government. It's about transparency, it's about accountability, and he released them. And on the other hand, he said to those CIA employees who were following what the Department of Justice told them they could do, they would not be subject to further prosecution, because it's also about closing this chapter so we can move on to the future.
As you know, there have been a lot of objections, including the man who held your job in the Bush administration, Michael Chertoff. He says this: you're giving terrorists insights into things they need to prepare for, and they do prepare. And the second thing is you're sending a message to our allies that we're not reliable in terms of safeguarding confidential information. That's Mike Chertoff, the former Secretary of Homeland Security. General Hayden, the former Director of Intelligence, has said the same thing, saying that this makes us less safe putting this information out there. Are they wrong?
What I can say is, look, people can differ on this, but when you look at it overall, when you look at the information that was already in the public domain, when you look at the great public need for accountability and responsibility and transparency here, and when you look at our desire to close the book on this regrettable chapter and move the country forward, it was imperative, really, that the reports be released.
I want to get to the discussion about the border and other issues, but before we take a quick break, I want to give you a chance. Vice President Cheney, former Vice President Cheney, was right here, sitting there a little more than a month ago on this program, and he said because of the changes your boss, the President of the United States, is making in anti-terror policies and that you are implementing, that the American people are less safe, in his view. Can you look the American people in the eye this morning and say not only is he wrong, which I assume the administration would say, but that the Americans are more safe because of the changes?
I can look you in the eye, I can look the American people in the eye and say every day we think about the safety of the American people. We think about protection from terrorist acts abroad. We think about protection from terrorist acts internally. We believe that you don't need a Guantanamo to improve the safety of the American people and to minimize the risk of terrorist acts.
Much more to discuss with the Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano.